what they did, and outside of just being, painting with the broad brush of saying that it was due in large part to entrenched racism, which of course did play a significant part, and instead of just saying, it was necessarily racism itself, because I'm sure a lot of the people who were acting in a way in which they want to keep Britain British, and they're not necessarily implying white, although that is definitely the indirect implication of that. There's also a collective sentiment when it comes to wanting to keep Britain, I guess, safe in their minds, right? There's the idea of the other, the entrenched xenophobia of wanting to basically keep immigrants out. That played a very large part. There was the painting of Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite, which was very, very effective. Not to mention the non-stop British press pushing that narrative. So this was an article that obviously will sound a little bit sad to a handful of individuals, but we'll explore it, all right? And I'll try to explain a little bit about why it's not as depressing as this article makes it sound. But anyways, all unhappy social democratic parties are alike. They've lost the white working class. Britain's Labour Party was decimated in its working class home last night when Boris Johnson's nativist Tories ousted one Labour MP after another in England's north. Once the UK's industrial heartland, today it's Rust Belt. The migration of Britain's abandoned workers to the anti-immigrant nationalism at the root of Brexit closely tracks the pattern we've seen in France, where the longtime proletarian strongholds of the French Communist Party have turned to insular nationalism of two generations of Le Pen's in recent elections. And in the historic home of European social democracy, Germany, the world's oldest social democratic party, is polling close to single digits. Last night's election in the UK marks the worst performance by Labour since 1935, just as the most recent elections in Germany and France also marked the low points for the Social Democrats and Socialists respectively. Socialists do govern in Spain, Portugal, Denmark, and Sweden, though the Swedish Social Democrats have experienced their worst elections in 2018 and govern now in coalition with the nation's Greens. But these are exceptions to the painful decline of European social democracy. Four kinds of fragmentation have vexed the parties of the European left over the past 20 years, as they vexed the Democratic Party in the United States as well. Underlying all three of these fragmentations is the delinking of class interests, as globalization and financialization, the latter particularly pronounced in the UK and the US, have undermined the egalitarian achievements of the post-war era. Parties of the center-left have been stretched ideologically, often to the breaking point. The 90s saw Britain's New Labour under Tony Blair, America's Democrats under Bill Clinton, and Germany's Social Democrats under Gerald Schroeder all move to globalize and deregulate their economies to the benefit of those nations' banking and corporate sectors and to the detriment of the working class voters. The collapse of 2008 and the hugely unequal recovery that followed has led to battles between the center-left and a more militant left in virtually every industrialized nation. In France, the venerable Socialist Party has given way to the further left party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the vapid top-down Boudigesness of President Macron, while much of the white working class has cast its lot with the yellow vests and the Le Pens. In Germany, the Social Democrats have joined themselves so tightly at the hip with Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats that the young have left them for the Greens, while the workers of the East have drifted to the nativist AfD. Just this month, the SDP elected younger, further left leaders in a belated attempt to halt the party's slide. In the UK, of course, the Corbynistas took control of Labour, shifting its economics to the left, and more damagingly exhibited some kind of blind romantic infatuation with the left's authoritarian regimes in developing nations that has helped bring down the new left of the late 1960s. Within the Democratic Party of the US, of course, a battle is now raging between the party's left and the more centrist wings, though neither Bernie Sanders nor Elizabeth Warren, thankfully, has shown signs of the revolutionary romanticism that characterized Corbyn and the Momentum supporters. One consequence of yesterday's UK election is that the Tories will now have to represent voters who actually want higher public investment in the National Health Service, in schools, in the industry, more of a mixed economy, albeit for white England. In this, the Tories will be following the Le Penites in France, who are assiduous defenders of the nation's generous welfare state, so long as it doesn't extend to immigrants, Muslims, and the like. Donald Trump was elected, of course, vowing not to cut Social Security and replace NAFTA, promises he has now marginally and imperfectly made good on. But true to Republican orthodoxy, he and his Republican congressional ilk have also spent the first year of his presidency trying to take health coverage away from tens of millions of Americans and rewarding the rich with an immense tax cut. His base, like Johnson's, is knitted together by xenophobia, racism, sexism, and a rage against the advocates of modernity that late capitalism has rendered harsh and degrading to many of its voters. Social democrats and socialists still govern in Europe, in Iberia and Scandinavia. The regional separatism and nativism pose threats in those regions as well. In Spain, the center-left socialists and the more anti-capitalist Podemos have agreed to form a coalition government, a combination that the various wings of the Democratic Party in the US will, one way or another, have to create their own version of if they're to defeat their own nativist authoritarianism next year. Marx never wrote about what would become of the industrial proletariat if and when history passed it by and cast it aside, much less what it would become if the agents of its demise included such centre-left parties as those led by Blair, Clinton, and Schroeder. From Michigan in 2016 to Manchester last night, we're seeing what's become of it, and it will require a reinvention of social democracy and years of hard political work to build a governing left anew.
Did you enjoy what you just watched and now crave more nectar of the damned? Did you know that if you're watching on YouTube, you're only getting half the surfy experience? We upload all of our content commercial and censorship free to our Patreon. Due to the general demonetization of our videos, we now upload half of our original content directly to those who can help us produce this show. Want even more nectar than that? Well, come join us at twitch.tv/TheSerfsTV, where we do weekly live streams, debates, interviews, AMAs, and more. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can help support our show 100% free by subscribing to our Twitch channel. So come join us, be merry, and know that your support is helping us do great things.
Like pay rent and eat.
Hearing that a guy talked to a burning bush doesn't prove anything other than that he might be crazy or took some really great magic mushrooms.
We would first and foremost like to thank our god, Nicholas Marx, we worship at your temple. We would like to thank our monarch, Elsie Hupp. Your generosity has made this entire thing possible. We would like to thank our lords, Ricky Pilgrim, I'm Raft, and Michaela Schmidt. You are the pillars of our organization. To our knights of the surf table, Paul Parfit, Daniel Kahn, Fair Tahan, Clement Chutzkoff, Schizosaurus, Josh Mickelson, Dr. Zayas, Cooper Pilot, Andre Lynn Epperly, Dylan Bith, Terry, Todd Buckingham, Jed Lewis, Todd Lajeunesse.